Back in the early 90s, the 16-bit era provided us with some great times and good memories. I loved the era because it felt like for the first time the gap between arcade and home had finally closed. Not perfectly, but close enough. However, a divide still existed between games you could play at home and on the go. Things always felt like a step down when you went off TV. Just look at the Game Gear versus the Genesis. Sure, the Turbo Express proved the technology was possible, just far too expensive. Sega, to their credit, did once try to give us the same experience in the living room and in our hands, with the Genesis Nomad, a portable Genesis. Released in October 1995 for $179, this nifty little machine came and went without much impact. But the story of Nomad is still interesting regardless. Sega has never been shy about recycling hardware. Whether for profitability, efficiency, or portability, nearly every single machine Sega has ever made received revisions, Model 2s, or got reworked into something else. Case in point, the Game Gear is the Master System, with some minor tweaks. The Master System and SG-1000 before it were shrunk down over time, and the Genesis received the same treatment with a slim model, to use a modern parlance, first arriving in April 1993. The smaller Genesis 2 was important in curbing Sega's losses when fighting Nintendo in the early 90s price wars. Less parts means less expenses. But in the Genesis 2, the engineers at Sega learned a few things and were able to shrink things down a bit more, creating the Mega Jet, also in 1993. This device found its way into some Japan Airlines flights, where customers could use the Mega Jet in a pay-to-play setup. A few games were on hand, or you could bring your own. The Mega Jet was installed into the armrest, which helped avoid cable clutter. Everyone and their mother who thinks they know everything about Sega will drone on and on about Sega's lack of popularity in Japan. But the Mega Jet sparked enough interest to bring the machine to retail, debuting in March 1994. The consumer Mega Jet was the same as the kind you'd find on an airplane, only with free-flowing cables, which you need. It took no batteries and had no screen. Sega went back to the drawing board, adding battery power, a speaker, and a screen to the Mega Jet. In that, the Nomad was born. There isn't much to say about the tech inside because it is exactly the same as the Genesis, and that was the main selling point when the Nomad fell out of the sky in 1995, that your entire Genesis library would work, so you'd instantly have games on the go. And if you were a good Genesis owner who bought one back in the Altered Beast days, you probably had at least 30 games by 1995. Now, there are a few differences between the Nomad and your stock Genesis. The Sega CD, 32X, and Power-Base converter will not work. A few games also do not work, and funnily enough, X-Men can't be finished because the game requires you to hit the reset button. The Nomad doesn't have one. However, the barely adopted 6-button control scheme is built in, perfect for Super Street Fighter 2. The Game Genie works, and all multiplayer games work because of a built-in Controller 2 port, so you can get crazy with the Activator and Menacer. If the small screen for some of those games is too much to bear, you can always plug the Nomad directly into the TV. The Nomad was by far the most sophisticated, expandable piece of gaming hardware you could find in 1995. At $179, it wasn't the friendly unit shifter Sega had hoped for, and the price was cut to $99 the next year. As cool as the Nomad was, its shelf life was not very long. In May of 1996, Sega made what is now remembered as a fatal move. To focus all resources on the next generation, Sega cut the price of the Saturn to $199 and killed off everything else the company had, save for only the very best-selling Genesis games that you probably already had. Hundreds of games went out of print, and the Nomad's best selling point down the drain along with it. The final few games went out to stores in 1996 and 97, and while the Nomad still hung around, if you found one in 1997, it was unsold stock. Eventually, 1 million Nomads were sold in the US. But would an extended life of the Genesis been a benefit to the Nomad? It's hard to say. The small screen really didn't suit some Genesis games well. Text was too small to read in some cases. Also, crunched up graphics aren't all they're really made out to be. At the same time, the next gen was taking off. And while we would go back to that aforementioned step down in graphics, 1996 was an unusual time, where 32-bit games on CD were cheaper than 16-bit games on cartridge. Sega got it right with the Game Gear, because games reworked for a smaller screen were better than taking a TV game and shrinking it down. A remade 16-bit machine with unique cartridges at a lower price, a la the Game Gear, would have probably been better. But then Sega just gave up the ghost anyway, so in the end, it all means nothing. To bring things full circle, the lessons learned from shrinking down hardware that gave us the Nomad don't end here, because thanks to this little portable, the guts of the Genesis became so small and cheap. It gave our favorite 16-bit machine one final push, with the super small Genesis 3, released in 1997, that dragged the Genesis past the decade mark. I always thought the name was a little off. Sure, nomads have no home, always wandering about, but why not keep with the biblical naming scheme? Exodus would have sounded much cooler.